right, thank you very much, Ekene Ndule, for that background report. And joining us right here in the studio to discuss preventing drug abuse in Nigeria. Let me first introduce here in the studio Shadrach Imudia, Shadrach Haruna, He's Secretary to National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, NDLEA. A pleasure to welcome you. I almost mixed up your name there.
Well, thank you very much. He sounds like somebody from Edo State.
All right. And
thank you.
We have also been joined here in the studio by Dr. Aseka Mejoy, Senior Registrar, Behavioral Medicine, National Hospital, Abuja. Thank you for coming on Good Morning, Nigeria.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Yeah, mate.
All right. Also joining us for the conversation right here in the studio is the Managing Director, Vagada Specialist Rehabilitation Center. A pleasure to have you, Dr. Hope Omeza.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Nigerians.
Morning, you're welcome. Also joining us for the conversation in our Benin Network studio is Dr. Okonkwo Bartholomew Chukwemeka. He's a Senior Registrar, Federal Neuropsychiatric Hospital, Benin City. Many thanks for joining us, Doctor.
Much. Good morning, Nigeria.
Let's get the conversation rolling. We're talking preventing drug abuse, but we can't begin to talk about prevention if we don't know what the causes are. And so from your field operations, what would you say are the major causes of drug abuse in Nigeria? Talking about why people abuse it, sources, how do they get it, how does it get into the country, is it where they farm them, do they produce it somewhere? What have you found?
Well, thank you very much. When you want to know the causes of drug abuse, it's deep-rooted, some sociological and some peer pressure, and of course globalization of a wannabe culture. And of course it could also include poverty and lack of employment. You see, all these factors come to bear on individuals, and some of them actually respond by trying to go away from the present misery by taking drugs, which will give them a temporary relief, but of course has a long-lasting effect, which will result into dependency on drugs. So I think the source of these drugs is also, of course, cannabis. Cannabis is the most common drug, and the most common drug of abuse. It can be grown anywhere, and it's well grown in the country. In so many parts of the country, we have cannabis farms, which we have tried to destroy, and we have destroyed so many acres of cannabis farms lately. So the source of others, like methamphetamine is now produced in the country as well. And we have a huge cache of methamphetamine called Mpurimiri, which is being produced locally. And that again is in huge supply. And Nigeria, being a transit country in the past, has now become a user country as well. So many drugs passing through Nigeria, like cocaine, heroin, they are also being used in the country. In fact, lately we have seen the use of fentanyl in the country, which is a deadly drug. And just this 2024 World Drug Report, it shows that there's another opioid derivative called nitazines, which is now being used. It's more deadly than fentanyl. And fentanyl is what is used to sedate the elephant. But our youths are using it already. And this one, we don't know where it's coming from. We're still investigating the source of fentanyl, still investigating the source of nitazines. But these are drugs being experimented currently by our youth in the country. So we are working hard to close our borders to drug importations and exportation of those one produced in the country, and destroying the manufacturing as well as the production of drugs in the country. And that is what you see in our effective action against drug use, against drug production. Then the preventive aspect, again, we have launched what we call War Against Drug Abuse. The War Against Drug Abuse is a community-based program where we intend to carry everybody along, because prevention is not just for the family. I mean, it's not just for the NDLA alone or government, it's for everybody, including the family sector. And what we launched recently, which is Safe Our Families, and other preventive actions put in place to ensure that we have families with drug testing kits at home. And what that means, if you suspect any member of the family that is using drug, you can actually conduct a simple test. And the essence is to see who is using drugs, to enable that person come out of it. You win that person immediately before it gets to dependency stage, where the person will become a menace to the family, to the public, and then to himself. So that is the essence of Safe Our Families launch, which we did recently during the World Drug Day.
I had wanted you to include, because every weekend, I know, it's a pattern for the NDLEA to publish, results of your raids, the people you apprehend and all that. But in spite of this, people keep going harder and harder into it. And so it doesn't look like you're going to stop ever. So why do people keep going in spite of the fact that they will be caught?
Well, that is a risk, which of course includes, why would people go to commit murder when they know if they are caught they'll be killed?
Do some escape?
Yes. Well, you see, the problem in the country, I mean, the use of drug in the country is huge. In fact, it's something, what we are doing currently from our mapping, it shows that what we have, given the resources, we know what we have done so far is 1/10 of what we have in plan to do. We have planned to do 1/10. So if we have the resources required, in the coming weeks, months, and years, you would have seen that some of these things will be mopped off. Of course, you know that there's a step-up arrest and step-up seizures of drugs, mopping and destruction of drug farms. But of course, I tell you that this is the resources we have currently. And we know if we have more resources than what we have, we'd certainly go beyond this. We also know that this action is also yielding results already. We have reports recently from our partners abroad and from some countries abroad tell us that the number of Nigerians caught recently at the airports abroad has reduced considerably in the last 3 years. And some of them in prison for drug-related offenses have also reduced considerably. We have not done any research, but then these are reports coming from our partners and from some countries where we know they are source countries as well as destination countries for drugs. And this tells us that, yes, what we are doing is actually yielding results. But we intend to conduct a survey, a research to know how far the effort thus far has yielded the positive result towards combating drugs. We're not relying on what we hear because it's also not empirical, but when it comes from countries where we have so many Nigerians in jail that it has reduced considerably, we tend to believe them. And that gives us the encouragement to continue to do what we are doing.
All right, thank you, Mr. Harun. Of course, we'll get back to you. Thank you for your opening thoughts there. Let's get to Dr. Joy Asakame. You are a senior registrar of behavioral medicine at the National Hospital. I want you to speak to us about what the push factors are, really. A lot of people are concerned, like Victor mentioned, despite the effort of the NDLEA, there's still, people are, interested in going into the business of drugs, and then people are also getting excited about going into drugs, I mean using drugs on a daily basis. What are the factors responsible for that? And then speak about the driving force for the younger people. Decades back, we hear about much older people using drugs, but now we have younger people and even women. What are the likely factors responsible for this?
Thank you very much. So there are a lot of push factors. We could look at it using the biopsychosocial model. Psychologically, the media influences our youth today. We look at our celebrities, they show these substances in their music videos, and the youth, they love it. They want to copy these celebrities. There's this push for being rich quickly. So the youth look at that, they want to be rich, they get into drug trafficking. Youths are impressionable. So the older ones are able to influence them very easily. Some young ones are used to push cocaine to other countries and other psychoactive substances. Now, if you look at some biological factors, family history, some youths grew up in families where the use of psychoactive substance is a norm. Some youths grew up in families where alcohol was even produced, like the locally brewed brukutu. So to them is a norm. They don't see anything wrong with it. Some, until they develop psychosis, they really do not know that they are addicted to substances. They do not see any wrong in the habits. So there are a lot of push factors. I think that the political class, sorry to say, also backs up the habits. I wouldn't go into that so that I don't step on any toes.
No, but we'd like to hear it.
We would like to hear. That's why we're here.
Exactly. Yes. We want to hear it, just so we can work on it.
What's the link with politics?
Well, there's a lot of fund in drug trafficking, a lot of profits. So it drives political desires, political aspirations. So people go into that.
To raise the funds
for their political aspirations. So,
but for women, what would be the excitement?
For women, the euphoria, some people are emotionally troubled and then they go into substance use just to solve this psychological distress. Some have sleep problems, some from marital issues. So they go into substance use just to calm their emotions, some just for the euphoria. And then for other men, it could just be as a result of novelty seeking, pleasure seeking.
Great. Let's get to Dr. Hope Omaiza now. Thank you very much, Dr. Asakame, for that. I think it opens our eyes to some certain things that are happening in the drug world that are not on the surface, happening beneath. Let's hear from Dr. Omaiza now. You are the director of VAGDA Specialist Rehabilitation. VGADA Specialist Rehabilitation Center. Speak to us. You have one-on-one contact with people who are undergoing rehabilitation as a result of drug use. What are your experiences? What do they tell you, about their involvement with drugs?
Yeah, thank you very much. And then you see, actually, most times we tend to confuse risk factors for causes. Yeah, it is true that people may go into drugs because they don't have money, but we also need to know that there are people who go into drugs because they have the money. It's also true that people go into drugs because of, maybe women go into drugs because of heartbreaks or what they call breakfast, being served. But then you also need to know that people also take drugs because they got into a new relationship. All right, so it's like someone got into an accident and then you ask, what is the risk factor for this accident? Yes, the accident happened. Maybe he was not looking at his view. He was probably pressing his phone. Or he had a faulty car. Now, but if you now talk about, the weather. So what actually caused the accident? If the weather was bad, yes, but if he was focusing, he probably wouldn't get into the accident. So we need to look away from symptoms and look at the causative causes of drug abuse, and which includes the fact that people have low or are low in social skills that help them to cope with life stresses. There are many people who lived or grew up in homes where families, even parents, take alcohol, but they never did. There are people who lived with roommates in schools that they were all taking marijuana, but they never did. So what is it about them? Some of these persons are also low in self-esteem. A young man had told me how, in fact, he told the psychologist and said, my friends betrayed me. How did they betray you? He was told by his friends that if he takes a particular substance, his confidence will be okay, he will have his head free. So that person actually have a problem with handling stress that life portends. He had failed his work and parents were insulting him, or he didn't do very well. And so he came down under that under the weight of the criticisms. So if somebody tell me now that Dr. Hope, you are stupid, the same, I may walk away, I won't say anything. The same you are stupid, they will tell a friend or someone else, and he will say, how will he say this to me? So we need to know that drug abuse is just one behavior among maladaptive behaviors that are problems to people. Recently on Arise News, I was talking about gambling addiction. My organization have seen I've reached out several youths who are hooked on gambling, despite losing so much of their resources and their investments. So people are always, like my colleague here said, pleasure seeking. But there are people, instead of taking drugs to seek pleasure, they will rather choose make other choices to seek pleasure. You can get pleasure from swimming, from getting new grades, from getting a new job, from doing well at your work of place, get commended by your bosses. Now, so people, as early as possible, we must begin to direct intervention towards childhood psychology. Psychology in children is important. It's one place that needs to be broached so that intervention at those age groups can be implemented, so that young people grow who have confidence, who have self-esteem, who are assertive, who are able to say, I'm not going to do this and I won't do this, who know that, okay, this is wrong, this is bad, which is also where the psychoeducation part comes in educating them about drugs of abuse and the rest. So it's important that we must begin to look beyond, even when we go to the family setting, we have family therapy sessions for our patients too. You will need to look for dynamics that could lead to these issues. There are parents who have told their child themselves that you can take it, it's not anything. In fact, I've had a discordant family where the father do not see anything wrong with the child's alcohol use disorder. He just felt alcohol is, didn't I take alcohol? I will not all taking alcohol. Why is this on a different case? So you just know that this person will relapse immediately after he leaves because the mother is concerned, but the father is rationalizing the boy's behavior. So you see, when my boss here, the secretary, has mentioned that there is an approach now that is geared towards family, I'm excited because organizations like us and other government organizations must shift focus from just doing road rallies, for example, or just holding press conferences, but we must step down to the grassroots. And I'm happy the NDLA is already toeing that direction. They've been doing that. Most times when we interview NDLA, we just ask them about seizures, but they don't tell us how much they do at drug demand reduction. Your question about, why are people, your question, Mr. Victor, why are people still going into the market of, drug trafficking and the rest, despite the seizures? It's very simple. The truth is, there is no businessman that will go into a particular trade if there is no demand for that trade. You won't start selling jewelries if people don't buy jewelries. So while we are seizing, we need to also intensify efforts on drug demand reduction so that people don't even ask for drug. And so if that happens, people won't go into it. If they are going into it because it's lucrative, in as much as the NDLA sees the more, people will do more to get their substance to those who are demanding for it. They will take all the risk. They might even increase the prices for the drugs, which unfortunately, in the case of those who are addicted, they will find wherever money is to buy the drug. So if they were selling at 10,000 naira, for example, and the NDLA, raid and seize their large quantity, they have smaller quantity left, they are going to sell that at maybe 100,000 naira because they know that there is a ready market for it. The unfortunately, group of demanders, those who are demanding for these goods. And these are people that they should also be treated. Because if somebody is hooked on substance, despite the negative consequences, in the face of the negative consequences, he or she is going to continue use of that substance if he doesn't get help. And again, thankfully, the NDLA with other organizations have, rehab centers, and they are building more. And we have also partnered, they have referred patients to us even, and we are working together on all of these things. Yeah. All
right. Thank you, Dr. Omeza. Let's quickly get to Benin City, where we have Dr. Kuku, Okonkwo rather, Chukwuemeka. at the neuropsychiatric hospital in Benin City. I don't know what your patients tell you, but how much have you been able to get? Because I know as part of your treatment, you would also want to know how the individual, what drives the individual into whatever vices that has brought them to your hospital. And so what have you found in your experience?
Sir, sorry, if you don't mind, if you could kindly repeat your question again, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to know what you have found in your experience in the hospital that you operate, the people you deal with. What do they tell you is the driving force behind their addiction, their behavior that brings them to you?
Okay. If I get your question correct, you asked my experiences where I work, the individuals that present with this problem of drug abuse, what are their drives, what causes them. Sorry, I don't know if that was what you asked, sir.
Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much once again. Just like the secretary to the agency, NTA, and my colleagues had succinctly explained there, the issues surrounding drug abuse and the push is actually multifactorial, right? And I would want to look at an angle that hadn't been pointed out so far, which is the fact that currently we have a high surge of young people who participate in internet fraud, right? An important thing about this particular category of individual is that there is a need for them to perform most of their activities at the night, right? So the implication of this is that, the normal cycle, that the normal biological clock that requires an individual to be able to go to bed at a certain time, right? So, but in this case, for them to be able to continue to perform the activities that they engage in, they would need to make use of some certain substances, and in this case, unfortunately, has to do with the psychoactive substances. So here we look at a class of medication, including the cannabinoids, the methamphetamines, the opioids, the cocaines, the heroin, the codeines, etc. Right? So what this does is that they could start by, okay, I need to use this to improve my work output, right? But unfortunately, from using it to improve their work output, they begin to develop tolerance, right? They begin to develop dependence, and eventually it becomes a substance use disorder for them that, in the layman's term, we could begin to see that it has mastered the ability to be in control of use of that drug when they want to use. So it becomes a problem. Right? Then another important factor that also contributes is the fact that across the age group that had been cited, the fact that about 14.3 million Nigerians between the ages of 15 to 64 years old uses psychoactive substance or uses drug, right? Is the fact that we also have a desire among this age group to improve on their sexual ability or sexual skills, or if you wish. So the individual desires to last for, say, 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, And just like my colleague rightly pointed out, the media, right? So you see scenarios, movies, where, there is a picture of what should be the sexual power, in quotes, of a male or a female, right? The duration you are supposed to last, you know, and it gives a certain negative perception. So you find individuals desiring to meet up with such expectations that the society unknowingly had placed on them. So what happens? They go into a use of these substances. Some substances actually had been identified to improve sexual ability. So what happens? From using it, you know, once in a while to improve their sexual ability, they begin to develop the same tolerance, the same dependence, and it becomes a problem. Then eventually they could end up coming down with a number of factors. Another aspect we may need to highlight here, which would also be very important, is what we call the economic and the compulsive model, you know, that relates drug use and crime. However, we are not going to, our focus won't be the aspect of the crime, right? So you see that an individual begins to use psychoactive substance for whatsoever reason that they started use, just like the other guest speakers had highlighted. So what happens? Eventually, they develop the tolerance, they develop the dependence, and the drug masters them, the architecture of the brain areas that are able to enable an individual to inhibit some behaviors and control what they desire to do and want to do are distorted, are broken down. So that begins to make the individual to desire to acquire the same drug. That's compulsive behavior. So you find out that apparently they are no longer in charge of when they want to use the drug or not. So that contributes to the factors that makes them to present. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chukwuemeka, for that. You have opened, you know, another window to all of this and why drug abuse thrives. I'd like to get back in the studio now, and I'd like Shedrack Haruna to respond to my question. You talked about the efforts of NDLEA, and yes, we get to see reports every week, raiding this, raiding that, but not stopping. Dr. Maiza said, well, it doesn't stop because the demand is high. But is it possible that those who are actually the barons, I think that's the word, like the leaders, those who control the cartel, okay, now the cartel, those who control the spread, the importation, or if you like, the movement of these drugs, you don't really capture those people, you know, the leaders, those the kingpins, you know, in this drug business. You just go after the little fries, and so of course you cannot stop it, because I mean when the leader is still there and all of that. Is there a challenge for the NDLEA? Because Dr. Joy Asakame said, well, political elites too are also involved in this business. Do you have a challenge in dealing with those who are actually the leaders in this drug business?
Well, I think if you have been following your news recently, you would have seen that NDLEA has captured and harvested so many barons. In fact, the current move is not even to harvest flowers. We're going after the roots. And what that means is we go after the barons. And in the past 3 years, we have so many barons that have been arrested and have been prosecuted. In fact, we have some of them convicted already. If you look at the news background which your colleagues gave a while ago, it shows how many barons that have been arrested in the past 3 years, and some of them are undergoing criminal prosecution. We've had some of their properties and assets forfeited to the government. We have some of them convicted already, and some are still undergoing
But in the course of doing that, you have challenges as an agency.
Of course, with anything you have challenges, but we were able to surmount some of those challenges.
Which include?
Of course, it includes the manpower and the training and the capacity. But recently, you would have seen that we have increased the number of staff, and anywhere you will now see that your neighbor, NDLEA officer, is just like any other person. You will not know who is an NDLEA officer. In all our places, I wouldn't tell you some of our strategies, but of course, we know that we have deployed so many. And from those who are users, down to the middle peddlers, to the barons, we're tracing them, and we're getting them. We've destroyed so many of those, how do you call it, clandestine laboratories owned by barons. We've destroyed so many warehouses in the forest where they have stacked so much of this cannabis. We're going after the warehouses, the bonded warehouses as well, where we have recovered so much of these drugs. And the barons are being arrested. So it's in the past that you don't see any effort to get the barons, but right currently, the whole effort of our offensive action is against the baron.
Now, earlier, I asked you, whether you were able to get, like Yere was asking just a moment ago, do you have a political challenge? That's actually what she's asking. Okay. Do you have a political challenge?
No, rather we have a political will to work. And that is why we are achieving success currently. The political will, yes, probably the resources. And government we have a lot of competing demands for the resources we have. But of course, to our own end, we're getting those resources. And the more we get these resources, the more we prioritize we upscale our efforts. Before 2021, there was virtually no vehicles, operational vehicles. But now we have operational vehicles. And you see how our officers are going to the deep forest. Not just operational vehicles, including armored vehicles, to such unmanned areas where our officers are being challenged by gun barons and their foot soldiers. So we have armored vehicles, we have scanners at the airport now, and we're buying more. Recently, government approved some for us to buy, and also approved weapons for us to defend our officers, for our officers to defend themselves in the course of operations. So all these are government actions and government political will to ensure that we upscale our offensive action.
I asked you earlier,
yeah,
do some escape? Because the reason I asked at a point why people still go ahead, and I'm talking about particularly those you catch, you apprehend at the airports.
You mean escape like what? Escape from the net?
I'm coming.
Yes.
Those you get at the airports.
Yes.
Every week.
Yes.
Why do they keep doing it if they know for sure that they are going to be caught?
Well, it's not.
Why do they keep going to the airports?
It's not the same people caught that go back to do it. Different, of course, there's so many of them.
But we get to hear more stories.
We hear about some of the push factors, which includes quick wealth. People take, how do I call it? They take a risk to do anything.
But if you are not going to get to the end of it, why do you do it?
Exactly. We hear more stories of the apprehension, not about the convictions. The convictions.
Oh, no. You heard about the convictions. Just between January and May alone, we had about 9,000 convictions. That tells you the effort. And when you said escape, no, if you are caught, you can't escape.
No, I mean not if you are caught.
Yes.
If it boils down to the same question I've been asking, if, for instance, I know that if I go to the airport, you are going to apprehend me, why do I want to try at all?
Yeah.
People try because they think that there's a chance somewhere that they could go. Maybe Mr. A, was able to pull through. Of course, they have a network. Yep. Mr. C was caught, but Mr. D did it and got away with it. Yeah. Is there a chance that people still manage to escape the airport, for instance?
Of course, you can't say you achieve 100% in everything. But with the acquisition of scanners and intensive investigation now, I think it's going to be difficult. Hitherto, yes, we had scanners at all the airport, but now we have scanners at the major airport. And that's why you see seizures all the time. People they take the risk to come with it because of the money involved. Little drugs, of course, if you know that one cup of cocaine like this will give you millions of dollars, why not? Take that risk. Because now we're mopping it off the street, so the price is going higher for the little quantity. Of course, the law of demand and supply applies, just like our colleague Meza just said. If you mop off drugs from the street, the little ones on the street will have a very commanding price. And people take that risk to do that. They come in, and we get them all the time. So when you see so many of them being arrested at the airport, it's because of that surveillance which is now being mounted, because we have scanners, and we're acquiring scanners for more airports. So that is the offensive action.
You talked about convictions, and you said, well, over 9,000. Like I said, there's more news about the apprehension, all the time, compared to the news of those who get convicted for being involved in drug trafficking. or drug use, whichever one. Would you say the penalty is stiff enough, you know, for those who get apprehended, who go to court, who get convicted and all of that? Would you say the penalty is stiff enough? Because maybe that's why Victor keeps asking, why do people, you know, continue to go into it? You know, a situation where somebody commits a crime, maybe you're caught with drugs worth billions of naira, and then you get to court, you get convicted, and then maybe you are asked to stay for like 1-2 years, and then you get out. I mean, why would somebody else
Does the
not
law
want to
need
try?
to get stiffer?
Yeah, you know, you said we don't hear more about convictions. Of course, we don't report so many of our activities. In fact, the seizures and arrests you see is just a little of what we have in a week, of what we have in a week. It's not everything that's been reported. If we report everything, the country will be alarmed. But when it comes to convictions, of course, it's a court process. And the court process takes a while. But between January and now, we have over 9,000 convictions, which tells you the process the court is even taking. The court is very fast in conviction these days. But over and above that, the punishment to me is stiff enough. Not just convictions and incarceration, but now if you are caught, it's taken as a lifestyle crime. Meaning that whatever you have, we have a new law which is called Process of Crime Act. If you are caught with any drug, even if you have 5 years, all your assets will have the basic presumption that you got it from the process of crime. And those assets will be liable to forfeiture to the government. Your properties will be liable to forfeiture. So that is stiff enough, and that is to disrupt the criminal enterprise involved in drug trafficking. So it's not just conviction. 15 years, 25 years, you have all your assets forfeited. I think that is strong enough for anyone.
All right. Since we are talking prevention, Dr. Joy, what are the health implications? Perhaps if we are talking about how damaging, you know, drug use can be, maybe we'll be getting somewhere. What are the health implications from the minimal to the worst of it?
Thank you. The health implications of substance use are extensive. They are grave. First, you look at the physical aspect of it. These substances, they affect the vital organs of the body. The kidneys, the liver. Excessive alcohol consumption results in issues like liver cirrhosis, liver cancers. Smoking, cannabis, cigarettes result in lung cancers. You have cognitive decline, people losing their ability to think, focus, people losing their memory because of substance use. Psychologically, you have mental illness developing from something as easy as sleep problems to psychosis. The use of cannabis has been linked in several researches to development of schizophrenia. Some studies show up to 44 to 50% conversion from cannabis use to schizophrenia. And schizophrenia is purely a psychotic illness. So the other psychological implications of substance use would include depression, anxiety, you know. And going to the social implications, people get to lose their jobs. So I would give certain instances to make it more, you know, graphic. So I'll use patients while keeping confidentiality. So I've seen patients, for example, a doctor, a surgeon, who abused pentazocine. He self-injected up to the point of, you know, ruining his wrist joints. And as a surgeon, you know, that's his source of livelihood. He uses his hands. Now, the ulcers from injections have eaten deep into the wrist, and there's just a thin strip left in that wrist. That surgeon is meant to undergo an amputation. And he's having a difficult time making a decision, because if he loses that hand, what does he use for his surgeries? How does he move on with life? What does he depend on next? You know, that same person is having issues with his family, wife, children, you know. Unemployment for some other people because they are not able to focus, their cognitive ability has declined so much. For example, bankers make so much mistakes with data, and of course when you're making mistakes with figures at the bank, you're losing money. You know, absenteeism from work. I heard of a story of a bank manager who started abusing cocaine, and then she lost all her money, lost her job. She was still in the habits. So in a bid to get more money to purchase cocaine, she started practicing oral sex on men just to get money. You know, imagine someone in the cadre of a bank manager going down to the streets under the bridge to perform oral sex just to get money. I heard of someone who, because of substance use, sold his story building for 5,000 naira just to buy, you know, the substances. So many cases, you know. So socially, you know, people lose their families, people lose their jobs, people lose employment, people lose their career. They are unable to continue with school because mentation is poor. They are not able to comprehend what they are doing in school, and so, you know, they have to leave. So the effects are far-reaching.
Well, it's not a good situation from what you have painted for us, Dr. Asakame. But let's get to Dr. Maiza now. You know, despite the implication of using drugs, some people, in a bid to recruit more drug users, would say it depends on how strong you are or how tough you are. Is it true that some people are just too tough for drugs to deal with, and some others? Would you say that there's a difference in our build-up as individuals, and why some people go on for life and nothing happens to them, and some others come down with the first use?
Yeah, of course, we are not all the same. Even when you have a twin, characteristics are not the same because of different biological and genetic makeups. Just the same way you have an individual takes chloroquine, it doesn't itch him or her, but then someone else take probably very little dose of that and he goes everywhere itching. Now, it's the same thing. Research has it that just 10 to 15% of those who use drugs have a problem with the drug. I mean, develop problematic drug use disorders. That being said, it means that if you have 100 people using drugs, you just have 15 or 10 of them that won't be able to stop the use, or that it will eat into their life. Families become dysfunctional, relationships, social, work, balance, and the rest. However, if we have, in Nigeria, for example, we have youths about 70% composing our population. That comes to around 150 million youths. And let's say these individuals are using drugs, for example, and then you have 15% of that number. I'm sure you know what that connotes. If you, in a family, have just one person, a family of, say, 20, with extended family, immediate families, and then you have, say, one person having addiction, it brings everybody down because the family needs to deal with stigma, family needs to deal with depression and anxiety. We've had to manage a mother who developed panic disorders because she was always called severally by, you know, mobs sometimes, or from the police, asking her, are you the mother of this person? Your child is in our custody. Come before we kill your son, you know, coming from the mobs at times. So whenever an unknown number calls her, she just goes everywhere. Her BP is shooting up, she's sweating, she's shaking everywhere. So you can just imagine. Now, you look at the siblings of these people too, they are also being stigmatized. Parents have developed hypertension and even stroke. A mother had even told me, doctor, I'm just going to kill this boy. I mean, you won't blame her because she has gone through a lot. All she has worked for, this young man has squandered all on drugs. So you can just imagine the burden it brings on all the family members when you have one person, just one. And some families have 2, 3, and even more. So it's not because we say 10 to 15%, oh, it's a small number. We can't deal with even 1%. Because again, addiction, what we have not mentioned is that it's a relapsing disease. Just like your hypertension, just like your diabetes, it's a relapsing disease. The tendencies for people to relapse, even after treatment, is quite high. So how much more can families afford to shell off for treatment of individuals who have these problems? So how many psychiatrists, experts do you even have in Nigeria? How many rehab centers do you have to manage them? So again, you wouldn't say that because 85% or 90% of people will not have problem, let me also try. Because you don't know which of the divide you will fall into. A young man had just tasted marijuana once and he went off. He presented psychotic symptoms, and he had to be treated for over 3 months in the facility. So these things vary. So you are not going to say, because I have an uncle who takes marijuana all his life, he's even more responsible than my father. You know, so many of us have such uncles or such relations that we can make reference to. And so which is why in psychoeducating children, we need to tell them the truth. The whole scare tactics of, oh, if you take marijuana, you fall into the gutter. If you take alcohol, you die. These children know parents or uncles who are using these substances and are not dysfunctional. And they're not falling. So they just feel you are lying to them and they don't trust you. So, but they must know that this is the truth. But then you don't know which of the divide you will be. And if you get, unfortunately, into that divide, it's a problem for you, for your immediate family, for the society. Because we are losing a talent, you know, to drug. If we lose a young man or a child to drug use behavior.
Is it true that the use of drugs inspires, you know, certain people? Because, you know, Dr. Sakame was talking about the media and celebrities using drugs, and we see them advertise it, we see them say it in their words, you know, and we've heard people say, well, if you are into a certain field, maybe music and all of that, if you are not on all those substances, no inspiration. Is that true? Okay.
That is what we call drug messaging. There's something we call drug messaging in treatment, where people, I mean, the drug make them believe that this is why I am doing this. I remember in Uga Games in 2022, I was speaking to athletes in Ilag, and I told them, they also feel that if they take substances, they're able to perform more, you know, play more. Now, the truth is, yes, you perform more, but your basic, stable, physiological capacity declines after you use that substance. And without use of that substance, a player that can play for 40 minutes, maybe just half time and leave the stage, can now play for 90 minutes, right? But without the substance, he will not be able to play for that 40 minutes again. An individual who was able to write, maybe write songs, or 2 tracks or whatever, after he starts taking substance to maybe do more, if he stops or if he doesn't take that substance a day or 2, he won't even be able to function. That tells you that we need to learn new skills for inspiration, new skills for performance, new skills for capacity. Not choosing drug is not an alternative, because it further declines your capacity without or pre-use. So it's important that we must begin to, you know, create awareness around alternatives for young people, because everybody wants to increase their pleasure level or create pleasure and numb pain. So people need to learn new ways or alternative ways for numbing pain, creating pleasure, and increasing pleasure. So if we have this, somebody who needs inspiration, we know that you should eat well first, you should sleep well, you know. So, and then perhaps visit the gym, swim. There are activities you can do that will boost your serotonin, dopamine levels, you know, and you'll be at that euphoric level, I mean, state of mind that you feel you need to function. All right. So if some parents have taken substances just because they have a speaking engagement, but then what happens to you managing your time, knowing about the event, knowing about your audience, learning about your audience, you know, practicing before the mirror, and all of those things. So there are other alternatives that can be used, which is what we are saying. All right. So I think these are the things that are.
All right, Dr. Omeza, thank you very much for your contribution. We'll pause here for a break to pay some bills. When we return, I'll bring Dr. Okonkwo back into the conversation. Please stay with us.
The federal...
All right, thank you very much for staying with us on Good Morning Nigeria. We've been discussing preventing drug abuse in Nigeria. Let me get back to Dr. Chukwuemeka Okonkwo in Benin. Doc, I just wanted to share again from your experience. Would you say that there is a risk, you know, to national security, for instance, from what you know, interacting with your patients?
For that question, sir, I'd like to bring in a concept here. that was developed by a man named Goldstein. So it's about a concept that tries to conceptualize the relationship between drugs and crime, right? So you look at it from a number of levels, where you have the psychopharmacological model of the relationship between drug and crime, right? So in this concept, he basically talks about the fact that use of substance begins to lead to a distortion in the individual physiological, biological, and anatomical makeup, right? So here we are looking at the centers of the brain that are in charge in ensuring an adequate inhibition of behavior and character, right? So use of drug distorts this. So once this happens, what begins to happen is that the individual begins to develop what we call withdrawal, tolerance, and dependence, as we had highlighted before. So these experiences can be excruciating, they can be distressing, and the only way out, usually, that seems as if is the solution for the person, is to find the substance, right? So what do? They go at any length to get the substance, and this involves, engaging in different crimes, such as theft, armed robbery, right, destruction of property, and a number of things, right? So, and you would agree with me that such crimes could involve a risk of harm to others and the community and the society at large, right? So that in itself is a risk to the internal security of the community where the individual resides. So when you go a step higher, when you look at the economic and the compulsive model, right? This basically also relates to the individual that uses this substance, right? And because there is a demand, just like one of my colleagues had pointed out, which is the economic link in this model, right? So the drug industry market, there is a component here. You are looking at the manufacturers, to the traffickers, to the distributors, to the dealers, and to the end users, right? So they understand this is business. So they have to be able to supply this. And in supplying this, and you'd agree with me that they would have to break some certain protocols that ensures the internal security of a place or a locality. And this can increase the risk of violence in an area, and as well as risk of crime. And this already breaches the internal security of that particular domicility or location. Then when you go a bit further, you look at what we call the systemic model, right? That tries to look at the fact that the drug use is a market that has different players, different actors, and we had mentioned some of them, right? So in their struggle to maintain their territory, what in the street they could call territory, in their struggle to maintain their territory, they also engage in some other activities, such as weaponry, right, where they have to acquire weaponry to be able to showcase a measure of power to their opponent or to their rival cartel group, right? So in so doing, you begin to see a scenario whereby people begin to engage in, gun firing within a locality, distorting the internal security of that area, leading to loss of lives, loss of property, and that also distorts the internal security of the place. And importantly, before I leave it at this point, we also have to look at it from the angle that the drug use also, has a relationship to cultism and gangsterism, right? So if that be the case, that when individual engages in cultism, gangsterism, most times the activities, the ritual would require a measure of elation, a measure of, sense of feeling of being in charge, of being powerful. And what gives you that sense of feeling of being powerful? Drug. So that relationship right, enables them to be able to, you could see an individual without compassion, without empathy, shooting a fellow individual for whatever reason. So that in itself is crime, and that distorts the internal security. So it's a complex relationship that begs for immediate proactive solution. Thank you.
Emeka, thank you so much. I like the way you express, the
link,
all of that. Very, very beautiful, and of course easy for anyone to understand. Let's get to Dr. I was just about to say Dr. Haruna. Of course, I'm sure maybe that's in the pipeline. But Haruna, we're talking about drug, the cartels and all of that. Do you have any international collaborations? Does the agency, NTA, working with other bodies outside of the country? Because we hear sometimes that Nigeria is not the destination for these drugs. It's a route, Nigeria, they from here to other countries, transit and all of that. So are you in touch with other agencies and other countries, around, or from countries where some of these drugs are coming from, just so that you can be able to track it and then reduce the whole situation?
Yep. Well, thank you. Before I answer your question, let me just correct the statistic I gave earlier. I did mention that between January and May this year, we have 9,000 convictions. Apparently, it's from 2021 to May this year that we have 9,000 convictions. Between January and May this year, we have 1,366 convictions, and more are coming in. Well, just again to go back to Dr. Chukwuemeka for the link and the nexus between drug and crime, what he has not mentioned is the fact that the bandits, Boko Haram, and all the insurgents, as well as the belligerent groups, they use drug to foster their terror. Indeed, the cost of drug now is actually heightened because of the use by this group we have mentioned. Because we're mopping off the street, but this group are constantly demanding for drugs. This clearly came to us from those military officers who are working there. Anytime they push them away, they see a huge cache of drugs. And that's why we now have armored vehicles that can actually penetrate some of the areas that we have information they store their drugs. So going back to your questions on the external or international collaborators, indeed, yes, we do. Drug is a transnational crime. And you can't fight transnational crime without bilateral cooperation with other countries, or without cooperation with police of other nations. We have a lot of MOU within the African sub-region as well as beyond. In Asian countries where we know some of these drugs emanate from, we have MOU with them. We have constant touch. We do have contact persons between the two agencies of those countries as well. We get constant information from our partners abroad, and part of the information we get is what we are seeing, resulting to some of the seizures we have. We cannot do without it. It's a transnational crime. And the essence is to foster this collaboration. And we have a web of collaboration through the multilateral settings to bilateral setting. The multilateral setting is also through the UN agencies, as well as through law enforcement of other countries like DEA, NTA, which is National Crime Agency of the UK, the British Border Force, the Indian anti-narcotic drugs, the Pakistanis, and all of them. We have this network and we're working with them. On a daily basis, we have contact persons communicating with them. So it is something that we must put in place, which we have currently. We have a dedicated office for that, and we have information sharing, which we call police-to-police information, informal form of sharing. And when we want to take actions, we take action based on intelligence shared. So there's so many actions we have to do, and so many things we have to do to ensure that we stop drug coming in and we stop drug from going out.
Based on the seizures that you've had and then the history, what country would you say most of the drugs that you have seized are coming from?
Well, if I have to pontificate without necessarily trying to say that the country is guilty, we have tramadol coming from Asian countries like India, but we do have a very good collaboration with India currently, where they too are stopping tramadol being produced in high dosage in India, and we're working with them. South Africa is another one, and those ones in South Africa are Nigerians. working with the collaborators in the country. And then, of course, we have UAE, where we have drugs being exported to, and so many other countries in Europe. And, of course, we're collaborating with all these countries. So there's just no area that is left unmanned currently.
Okay.
But we do know that, yes, it's happening, and then we have also set our own officers in place to see that they monitor the communications. And we're also helping some of our countries within the sub-region to also monitor the drugs coming into their country. Because they use countries, our neighbors, which are very close to us, bringing drugs there, and they try to ship in through the creeks. We know that. And our marine unit is also working hard to dismantle such cartel, bringing drugs from our neighboring countries through the creeks.
Now, in trying to mitigate drug abuse, is there a role for the churches, the mosques, religious leaders, communities, community leaders, society, family, parents? What's the role for all of them? Because apparently, security operations may not do the job alone. There may need to be some form of soft efforts that you have to make. What's the role in it for all of these people?
Thank you very much. I think our WADA program is actually structured to capture all these groups you mentioned. The churches, the faith-based organizations, the families, the traditional rulers, we work in the schools as well. We know that they have a very huge role. And families, just like Dr. Meza mentioned, a family unit is the basis of all this thing we're talking about. You have your kids, you need to allow them to learn social skills. Not just going to school. They should go to other things, because that is where they need to build their self-esteem. Because low esteem is part of the issues of peer pressure. So if families should realize that from the beginning, at the age 4, 5, you should introduce your children to other extracurriculum activities that will keep them busy, like games, not just computer games. They're going out to play volleyball, badminton, and all those things. Of course, which used to be in those days. But now that we have so many schools that are day schools, you don't see such activities happening anymore. But you need to encourage your children to go out for extracurriculum activities to build a self-esteem. And then, of course, families too, which we've just launched, the Safer Family Unit, is also a way to prevent such things happening in the family. If you notice, a member of the family is using drugs, just conduct a test and try to see how you can seek the help of people like Dr. Meza and our doctor here to help them out of the use. Of course, we have rehabilitation centers that will also intervene at that early stage to counsel and rehabilitate them.
What's the role for journalists without necessarily endangering themselves?
A journalist is also to help to propagate the message of, stop drug use. Of course, journalists has a huge role. In fact, without journalists, you wouldn't know how many people we have really counseled. Without journalists, you would not know the impact of drugs at all. Because some people are there in the villages that they hardly know what is happening in cities. And some are just taking it because of peer pressure, not knowing the impact it will have on their health. But journalists showing what is happening certainly will help the people.
Thank you very much, Shadrach Haruna, Secretary to the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency. We're beginning to round up the conversation because of time, but I'd like Dr. Meza to speak to someone who is battling addiction at this point. There are people who want to get out, but don't just know how to. So speak to us about the process and how they can get support to be able to get out of drug addiction.
Thank you very much. Anyone suffering addiction, even though we have slim resources available, but there is still ample support. We will have to utilize the resources available, first of all, in the family setup. Because the response, what we call expressed emotion, which is a spontaneous response of relations of those who use drugs towards an individual that uses drug. So that expressed emotion sometimes can be high in families, where everything the person now commits is directed at, oh, you have used a substance. Now sometimes families actually find out by themselves that They are words used. But however, there are children who volunteered such information to their parents and is now used against them. And that will not help the person who is suffering addiction at the moment. Then you move on to maybe the society, which might include friends. You know, friends have to be more supportive, you know, and non-judgmental. So I know that they are judgmental because they don't have knowledge. That, see, it can actually be me. It's him does not mean it can't be me. And sometimes families feel that these persons are doing it at their own volition. They have control of their behavior. Why can't you just stop this behavior? You see, so that is one advocacy the NDLA has also led, to not just arrest. They arrest drug dealers, not users. The users, we have agreed that these users are sick. So we must, when we look at it from the perspective of a public health concern, then we would be able to support them more appropriately. Now, so that families don't judge them. Oh, you are making us look bad. Didn't you train you well? Drug addiction is not moral failure. The use itself, we have mentioned causes. There's nothing about it that, oh, maybe the person wasn't properly trained. You know, so there are people who have been properly trained, but then because they lack in these psychological and social skills, resilient skills, they are not able to cope with stresses. So if we don't judge them as to, you are a bad boy. Somebody called yesterday and said, my brother is an addict. And I said, no, he's not an addict. He is your brother with other features you know about him which are good, but has a drug use problem or an addiction problem. So when you label the person, you're not helping the person. So we must shift our mind. That is getting help for the person. We must shift our mind from this person is doing this intentionally. It's his fault. He knows what he's doing. And then, of course, the journalist, as was rightly mentioned, the journalist must begin to, you know, spread the message in the light of reforming the perception of rehabilitation programs. People feel that rehab care programs are punishment programs for wrongdoing. It's not so. A mother called me and said, I was telling her the rooms are air-conditioned. He said, why air-conditioned rooms? Somebody is, I'm spending money, somebody is doing this to me, you are putting in an air-conditioned room. That's the person. Okay, if you have malaria and you have to be admitted in the hospital, won't you prefer air-conditioned room? So if you look at drug addiction as a disease, then we will be able to give the support this person needs. You have malaria, you have treated it. After 3 months, you may have it again. Do anybody beat you for having malaria again? Do anybody punish you for having malaria again? Everybody just garner support and support you to get treatment. So if we begin to think in that way, then it becomes safe. Those who are addicted to drugs will have that safe mentality that, oh, they will see the world as a safe space to express themselves, which is why, because the world is not safe to them, they are being stigmatized, they are being harassed, they are being punished for using drugs. So they eventually recoil to hideouts where they can use this without you noticing, or without people knowing, and it portends more harm to them. You know, there's this program now that the NDLA is beginning to invite, and of course, other health facilities on harm reduction. You know, which is to say, oh, if someone injects drugs, instead of them reusing the needle, why not get them new needles? That may shake some people up morally. But then this person reused needles and expose his or herself to risk of infections that can even kill the person before the drug use behavior. So why not ensure that this person is safe? In fact, sometimes rehab care program is to get the person safe. There are people whose brothers or families bring to the facility because drug dealers are after them. So, I mean, so they need to be safe. Many have lost their lives in the hands of drug dealers. In fact, somebody told me recently, that these drug dealers, sir, do not just sell with their ordinary eyes, that they actually fetish in what they sell to people, just to keep them coming. So, again, it's multifactorial, even helping them. Spirituality comes into play. You know, so parents must also, so it's a whole lot to discuss, which is one role Christians, Muslims, all religious practices, I mean, mosque and all need to.
You just made a point now about the fact that drug users are supposed to be treated like they have an ailment.
Yes.
Why does the police arrest drug users?
Well, I don't know of the police, but I have worked closely with the NDLA. And I'm telling you that NDLA men have called me in their various routes in Kano also, and said, Dr. Hope, we saw a woman now with her son, met some tramadol in the boy's bag. We are sending him to Abuja when they return to Abuja for sessions, for treatment, for therapy.
No, not that kind of drug use. Like you go to a place where you see boys smoking Indian hemp, cannabis. Is it cannabis or Indian hemp? I don't know. But whatever. And then sometimes you hear reports of the police getting there and raiding them and getting them arrested and all of that. Should that be the
Yeah, we do conduct raids sometimes, but such people are apparently being used to know the source of where they're getting these drugs from.
Oh, okay.
But if you notice that they are users, we send them to rehab. We don't prosecute them. We don't put any punitive measures on those who are users. But of course, possession itself is technically an offense. But it depends on the quantity. If you have a huge quantity, of course, you go for prosecution. But if the quantity is so minimal and you're a user and you have seen that you're becoming dependent on it, an option is given to you, and that discretion comes from the chairman, chief executive, who will tell the commander, send that person to rehab because of the quantity. But if the quantity is of a level that you cannot tolerate it, you take such a person before the court. Because technically, whoever uses is also in possession, and possession is an offense. But of course, we can't just do that with our eyes closed, not knowing the quantity that is amount to be trading in it and the one meant to be used.
Yes.
Yes. All right, Dr. Asikame, in a minute, we are almost out of time completely. What will be your parting shot on this program now?
Okay, so thank you very much. It's been a wonderful discussion. So I would like to say to the society at large, Nigeria, let's look at substance use using the disease model or the medical model, not the moral model, because these substance users are victims. So we need to support them, we need to stop the stigma, and there are a lot of outlets for help. The hospitals, the non-governmental organizations are out there to help. And then I saw a list of organizations affiliated with the NDLEA, with their contact details, addresses, and NDLEA registration number, and I was really impressed that these organizations are out there, a lot of them, a good number of them. So people should seek help, rehabilitation. Though substance use is a chronic, remitting, and relapsing illness, cure is, certain.
All right, thank you so much. Final words, Haruna. I would like to apologize to Dr. Chukwuemeka because of time, but I'm sure we'll have another opportunity, some other time for you to express yourself more. But we're out of time, and would like the Secretary of the NDLEA to just speak to Nigerians in 30 seconds.
Thank you very much. I think what I want Nigerians to do is to seek to go for prevention. In fact, the theme this year is evidence is clear, invest in prevention. And we want all Nigerians to come and join the government, not just the government alone, join everyone, the faith-based groups, the families, just like we've said here. The family should also start from home, and churches, schools should also do their own part. Media should also come in to help, because if we prevent this happening, then of course we'll not be talking of addiction, we'll not be talking of dependency, we'll not be talking of prosecution or any other thing. So prevention is better than cure. And I think that is the message to Nigerians.
Thank you very much, Shedrack Haruna, Secretary to the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency. Thank you so much for joining us for the conversation. Of course, we do appreciate Dr. Asekame Joy, Senior Registrar, Behavioral Medicine, National Hospital, Abuja. Thank you for being a part of it. Dr. Hope Omeza, Managing Director, Vigada Specialist Rehabilitation Center. Thank you very much for joining the conversation. And of course, Dr. Okonkwo Bartholomew Chukwuemeka, Senior Registrar, Federal Neuropsychiatric Hospital, Benin City. Thank you so much, Doctor. We do appreciate you. Of course, we'll bring you some other time and we'll get to hear much more from you. Thank you very much for your time. All right, so that's Good Morning Nigeria this Friday. Thank you so much. I'm Ian Ray John. Enjoy your weekend.
All right, and I'm Victor Azo. See you again on Monday.